grandfather's family, all of which came from impoverished communities within Arkansas and Louisiana. Although they were of low social ranking and barely able to afford food for only a small family, they each ended up having a dozen or more children. Many of these children had to find a way to sustain themselves, so they moved around the South. Most resided in Wynn Parish, Louisiana, an area of little or no schooling, housing, or much of anything. In desperate need of money, they relied on either farming or low-pay union jobs. If you can just picture a setting of shoeless children, weathered shacks, and no electricity and murky swamps, that is just about what it was like for these people. My great-grandfather, Jim Floyd McDowell, is one of these many children. He was a lumber grader who worked along the Louisiana Pacific Railroad, allowing him to move from one town to town and meeting many different people. At every stop along the railroad, he had a wife and an entire family. He continued having children until the ripe age of 62. We only know of 13 children, since they were spread out between Louisiana and Arkansas. He was missing an eye, so it's very impressive that he was able to attract so many women. Despite his deformity, he won the heart of my great-grandmother, Lula Mae Boyette. Her family had been farmers in the Wynn Parish for years. Although farming typically can be lucrative, the Boyettes were just as poor as the McDowells. Now you might be wondering why I gave you an in-depth background of my paternal family. All of this information is important in showing how amazing my family's accomplishments truly are, and that anybody can achieve greatness with just a drive to do so. My grandfather, Carlos Maximilian McDowell, was born in these impoverished conditions. He was named after the Peruvian doctor who delivered him, since his family had so many children they ran out of names. Although money wasn't plentiful within the home, he recalls on his childhood being great. His mother and father did their best to make up for the lack of experiences they were able to give their children. Soon after he graduated high school, he was drafted for the Vietnam War. Luckily, he didn't have to stay there long, thus coming to his Louisianan hometown. Upon returning home, he came upon the realization that work was a scarcity. He ended up taking his cousin's advice and moving to Killeen, Texas, to become a plumber. Since the city is home to the biggest military base in the country, there is plenty of work in the area. This is where his career began. He started a plumbing business along with a rental and electrical business. These ventures were all under McDowell Enterprise, so they all went hand in hand with each other. This business strategy created huge success for the rapidly expanding city. During his creation of a career, my grandfather met my grandmother. They married after only knowing each other for 2 weeks. Although most would assume a marriage such as this would fall apart, they've always kept a strong bond. My grandmother gave birth to 4 boys, which made the household extremely hectic. Having so many children made my grandfather even more motivated to create a nest egg for all the boys. Although one would assume becoming this successful would get to one's head, this wasn't true in my grandfather's case. He was still the same man who was devout to his family and wanted to help others who weren't as fortunate as himself. My grandmother was the cornerstone of the family, ensuring the values my grandfather found essential were instilled in their children. This showed to be successful since all my uncles are continuing the plumbing business and my father is a physician. The boys inherited his work ethic and devotion to family. Both values are what created my grandfather's success story. My father's career has caused us to live a distance away from my family in Killeen. When I was younger, we lived in St. Louis, Missouri, which was extremely hard on everyone, since we knew we wouldn't be able to see them for long periods of time. My grandparents called every weekend to make sure our tight-knit relationship stayed intact. This reflects how my grandfather never lost himself in success. Although my grandfather is extremely fortunate, he still lives very humbly. He drives a 3/4-ton pickup truck and loves to hunt. Also, he's lived in the same house since the 1970s. It's really cool seeing how nothing has changed and it looks the same as it did when my father grew up there. Never has anyone perceived him as a materialist. This humble attitude is what made my grandfather one of the most well-known men in town. It seems as if he knows everybody all around Texas, including state representatives. To this day, I'm still very close with my grandfather, even though I live over 100 miles away from him. My favorite way to bond with him is when I go to McDowell Ranch during hunting season. Usually, he gets up first to make sure everyone gets up at an ideal time to start hunting. Typically, he stays back at the house to let everyone else hunt, since there's a limited number of stands. This shows how he always puts his family first. My goal in life is to be like my grandfather. I want to make a name for myself and know everybody in town. Also, his strong connection with family is something I strive to have. A success story like his is something many desire to have, but might not have the drive to do so. With determination and a strong set of values, I hope that I can accomplish at least half of what he has. This success that he had reached was not because of luck, but because of determination and will to succeed. The drive to succeed is not something you are given, but something you have to find within yourself. As you can see from this story, you can achieve success even from the most destitute of backgrounds. Shout out Dr. Laporte. Thank you.
The Lord be with you. Show us your mercy, O Lord.